There are moments in pop culture that take the world by surprise. Moments that become headlines not because they were anticipated, but because they shattered the illusion of control. Moments when the curated perfection of celebrity culture buckles under the raw tension of real human conflict. On a night that was supposed to be a celebration of bold voices and fearless creativity, something happened that no one could have scripted. Amid the sequins and champagne, beneath the flash of cameras and forced smiles, the red carpet at the Las Culturistas Culture Awards became the scene of a public confrontation so jarring. It left onlookers stunned, security scrambling, and social media spiraling into chaos. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. This wasn't a fabricated PR stunt. This wasn't a stage drama for tabloid traction. This was raw, unfiltered, and disturbingly real. At the center of it all stood two women whose reputations couldn't be more different. Meghan Markle, former actress, royal rebel, global headline magnate, and Allison Janney, the acclaimed and adored Emmy-winning icon known for her elegance, wit, and an almost mythical ability to remain above the noise. No one expected them to cross paths that evening. Meghan wasn't on the official guest list. She hadn't been mentioned in any press briefings or promotional material. In fact, many in the crowd were genuinely stunned when she appeared, flanked by a small team of aides and an expression that seemed both poised and defiant. Her presence turned heads, but her actions in the minutes that followed turned stomachs, or at least, that's what eyewitness accounts claim. The question that now echoes in celebrity circles and internet forums alike is chillingly simple. What was Meghan Markle doing at the Las Culturistas Culture Awards, and why did her unexpected arrival end with Allison Janney discreetly signaling security, who then moved in to detain, or at the very least, forcibly escort, the Duchess of Sussex off the premises? But to understand how we got to that jaw-dropping moment, to really grasp the magnitude of what happened that night, we need to rewind. Because this wasn't just a single impulsive outburst. This was a confrontation years in the making. A slow-brewing powder keg of whispered resentments, bruised egos, and intersecting ambitions in an industry where image is everything and grudges are cultivated like fine wine. It all begins with a lingering question that still hasn't been answered. Why did Meghan confront Allison Janney in the first place? Some say it was a personal vendetta. Others claim it was a desperate attempt to reclaim relevance. There are those who insist Meghan had simply had enough. Enough of the shade, the subtle exclusions, the thinly veiled critiques that have followed her since she stepped down from the royal family and attempted to reinvent herself in Hollywood. But even those explanations feel incomplete. Because the truth is, this wasn't just about Meghan or Allison. This was about two powerful women on opposite ends of the Hollywood hierarchy, colliding in a space that thrives on artifice, ambition, and the silent war of perception. It was about what happens when a public figure known for her polished control loses that grip, and what happens when another, known for her grace under pressure, decides she's not going to be silent anymore. The footage that surfaced afterward, grainy, hastily uploaded, shaky with shock, shows only fragments. A brief exchange of words. Meghan's body language agitated. Allison's stance firm. A hand signal to staff. The appearance of two security personnel. And then, the crescendo. Meghan raising her voice, Allison turning away, security stepping in, and the crowd murmuring in disbelief. Some say Meghan accused Allison of spreading slanderous rumors about her behind the scenes. Others claim she demanded a public apology for a quote that had resurfaced from an old interview. Still others believe Meghan's target was the award show itself, and Allison was simply the unfortunate figurehead of a system she felt had continually snubbed and silenced her. Whatever the truth may be, the fallout was immediate. Within hours, social media lit up with hashtags like #JennyVs.Markle, #RedCarpetClash, and #CultureAwardsChaos. News outlets scrambled for statements. Publicists issued carefully worded non-responses. And the Culture Awards, a celebration of unconventional brilliance, found itself at the center of a scandal that had absolutely nothing to do with the art it was meant to honor. And yet, in the days that followed, what lingered wasn't just the shock of the confrontation, but the questions it raised about power, persona, and the delicate line between confidence and confrontation. Because this wasn't a spat between rising influencers or B-list reality stars. This was a clash between titans. One, a woman who once stood beside the Queen of England. The other, a woman who stood on stages across America delivering performances that left audiences breathless. What did Meghan say to provoke Allison Janney into calling security? Why did she choose that particular moment, that particular venue? Did she come to settle a score, or did she spiral in a moment of frustration and regret? And why has Janney, famously reserved, famously gracious, chosen this moment to draw a very public line in the sand? The answers, as always, lie in the details. In the timeline. In the whispered stories from behind velvet curtains and dimly lit after-parties. In the strained smiles, the eye rolls caught on camera, the quiet calculations made by publicists in crisis mode. And as we peel back each layer of this glittering, chaotic night, we'll come to see that what unfolded on that red carpet wasn't just a scandal. It was a reckoning. Because this story isn't just about a confrontation. It's about everything beneath it. The pressure to be liked, the fear of being forgotten, the hunger to control one's narrative in a world where stories are spun faster than they can be corrected. It's about trauma disguised as confidence and dignity disguised as silence. And it's about what happens when two legacies, one royal, one artistic, collide under the unforgiving spotlight of 1,000 lenses. So buckle in. Because this story isn't just viral, it's volatile. It's not just juicy, it's layered. And by the end, you might find yourself questioning everything you thought you knew about power, about perception, and about the real price of fame. And just when you think you know how it ends, you'll realize we're only getting started. The evening began like any other prestigious awards night in Hollywood, with carefully orchestrated elegance. The Las Culturistas Culture Awards had, over the years, built a reputation not only for celebrating pop culture in its most vibrant and unfiltered forms, but also for attracting a uniquely magnetic crowd. This wasn't your average industry gala. It was part satire, part spectacle, part serious cultural commentary. It was the kind of event that drew in the bold and the brilliant, the misfits and the moguls, all under the same roof, sipping cocktails beneath the soft shimmer of chandeliers and neon lights. The red carpet glowed with synthetic starlight, not just from the flashes of paparazzi cameras, but from the aura of the personalities walking down it. Euphoria's Hunter Schafer glided through in a custom glass-like gown that seemed to melt into her skin. Comedian Joel Kim Booster cracked jokes in interviews that immediately trended online. There was the unmistakable sight of Bowen Yang posing dramatically with Ayo Edebiri, the two of them mid-laugh, mid-glamour, mid-moment. Everything was moving in rhythm. It was loud, sparkling, and alive, a controlled chaos of excitement and self-awareness. Allison Janney arrived shortly after 8 p.m., accompanied by her longtime manager and wearing a sleek black suit with a satin crimson trim. It was classic Janney, dignified, effortless, tailored for impact, but never attention-hungry. Reporters greeted her with respectful enthusiasm. She smiled warmly, gave an impromptu wave to a group of screaming fans holding up posters of her from the West Wing, and paused for a few quick interviews where she gushed about her admiration for the event's fearless energy and its celebration of creative disruption. She's regal but real, one entertainment correspondent was heard whispering. Always the adult in the room, even when the room is on fire. As Janney made her way down the carpet, pausing every few steps for a photo or a brief conversation, she radiated what could only be described as seasoned authority. Here was someone who had paid her dues and earned the right to move through spaces like this with graceful command. And that's precisely what made the disruption that followed feel so jarring, so out of place, so completely off rhythm. Just as Janney reached the press line for a scheduled interview with Entertainment Tonight, the crowd at the opposite end of the carpet began to buzz, first in confusion, then in disbelief. A few cameras swung suddenly, breaking focus from the star they were filming. Whispered questions turned to loud commentary. A black SUV had pulled up without warning, and emerging from its door was a figure who wasn't listed on the night's attendance list. Meghan Markle had arrived. She stepped out alone, save for a young assistant and what appeared to be a security detail trailing a few paces behind. Her dress, a sharp, sculptural silver gown with asymmetrical sleeves, caught the light with every movement. Her makeup was immaculate, her posture composed. She looked every bit the Hollywood comeback queen. But to those paying close attention, there was something unusual about the energy around her. She didn't stop for interviews. She didn't flash the practice smile that celebrities wield like armor. She didn't wave. Instead, she walked, briskly, purposefully, with eyes locked ahead, as if the night itself owed her something. For the first 30 seconds, the crowd wasn't sure how to react. Was this a surprise appearance? An unannounced guest of honor? A publicity stunt? The hosts hadn't mentioned her. The organizers hadn't listed her in any media briefings. For someone of Meghan's status, a former senior royal and a global icon, to simply show up uninvited would be nearly unheard of. And yet, here she was, gliding past velvet ropes, brushing by startled reporters, ignoring questions, and heading straight toward the center of the red carpet. Security hesitated. You could see it in their body language. No one wanted to be the person who blocked Meghan Markle. And so, they didn't. From across the carpet, Allison Janney noticed the disturbance. A reporter was midway through asking her a question about aging in Hollywood when she turned slightly, eyes narrowing with curiosity. Meghan's approach was fast, her movements not frantic but undeniably charged with intention. It wasn't until Meghan was within 10 feet that Janney's posture changed. There was a subtle stiffening, a flicker of recognition, and then, unmistakably, a deep breath. Not out of fear, out of preparation. Meghan closed the distance in seconds. There was no microphone, no handshake, no smile. What passed between them in that first quiet exchange was inaudible to the cameras, but visible in its emotional weight. Meghan leaned in slightly. Janney did not. Meghan's eyebrows arched in what appeared to be pointed emphasis. Janney's face remained unreadable. Witnesses later claimed that Meghan's opening words were accusatory. Something about a comment Janney had made in a previous interview. Something about disrespect, being made to feel like an outsider, and women not supporting women. One reporter, who stood close enough to hear fragments of the conversation, described Meghan's tone as controlled but furious, like she'd been waiting for this confrontation for a long time. Janney, on the other hand, reportedly remained measured, not cold, not combative, just still. According to a makeup artist who observed the entire incident unfold, Allison's response was simple: "I'm not going to do this here." But Meghan didn't back away. Cameras began to focus in, not on the gowns or the laughter or the lights, but on this singular, unexpected clash. Security personnel, finally registering the escalation, began to move toward the two women. Janney made a discreet hand motion, barely visible, almost instinctual, and within seconds, her assistant stepped forward, whispering something into a staff member's earpiece. That was when it happened. Security stepped in, not aggressively but assertively. One placed himself between the two women. The other gestured subtly toward Meghan's assistant, who looked panicked. Meghan, visibly stunned, took half a step back. Her expression shifted rapidly, from confident to shocked, from indignant to what some described as on the verge of tears. A few camera flashes captured the exact moment Allison Janney turned and walked away, head held high, face impassive, her only words to the press being, "Excuse me, I need a moment." Meghan didn't follow, nor did she retreat immediately. She stood still, surrounded by murmurs, lenses, and confusion. For a full minute, the entire red carpet seemed frozen in a surreal standoff. Then, as if awakened from a trance, Meghan's assistant tugged gently at her arm, and the two retreated quietly toward the edge of the venue, followed by staff who appeared unsure whether they should block or guide her exit. There was no grand scene, no shouting, no handcuffs, but the message had been delivered. Meghan Markle had arrived uninvited, confronted a Hollywood legend, and been asked, with polite but unshakable resolve, to leave. And the world would never stop talking about it. If the red carpet confrontation between Meghan Markle and Allison Janney stunned observers into silence, what followed in the hours and days after cracked open a vault that had remained sealed for years? Beneath the polished public personas, beneath the rehearsed interviews and the image consultant's careful spin, there was something older at work. Something more personal. Because according to multiple insider sources, this wasn't a spontaneous explosion. This wasn't a one-off misunderstanding. This was the boiling point of a private tension that had simmered in Hollywood's undercurrent for years. Unspoken, undocumented, but no less real. To understand what happened that night at the Culture Awards, you must first understand who Allison Janney is in the ecosystem of the entertainment industry, and who Meghan Markle once aspired to be. Long before Meghan married into royalty and became one of the most talked-about women on earth, she was a working actress, climbing the treacherous, often humiliating, ladder of showbiz. She had roles in fringe dramas, walked red carpets in borrowed gowns, and sat in casting rooms alongside dozens of women auditioning for the same 2 lines on a network procedural. It's easy now to forget that phase of her life, because the post-palace narrative has been so all-consuming. But in the early 2010s, Meghan Markle was known to every assistant, casting director, and junior agent on the Sunset Strip as an ambitious, driven, and politically savvy actress who desperately wanted a seat at the prestige table. And no one embodied that table more clearly than Allison Janney. By that time, Janney had already cemented her legacy. She wasn't just an award winner. She was the kind of actress other actors admired. She had range, reputation, and that rarest of Hollywood credentials, respect without controversy. When people said serious actress, they meant Allison. When producers wanted gravitas, intelligence, and emotional complexity, they thought of Allison. She could command a scene with a single look. And she didn't play the fame game. She didn't need to. It's in that context that the first alleged point of friction is believed to have taken place. According to several insiders familiar with both women's early career paths, Meghan had long admired Allison from afar. During her days filming Suits in Toronto, Meghan reportedly referenced Janney in interviews as one of the actresses she aspired to emulate, praising her understated brilliance and ability to move between television and film without losing her authenticity. It was genuine admiration, or at least it appeared to be. But admiration is often a slippery slope to resentment in an industry that thrives on comparison. And as Meghan's ambitions grew, so too did the perceived distance between where she was and where she wanted to be. She wasn't getting offered the same types of roles. She wasn't being taken as seriously. The transition from cable drama star to prestige player was elusive, in the sense that she was being boxed in, both by race and by public perception, reportedly not at her. Then came the night that many sources now believe planted the seed of the eventual red carpet eruption. In 2015, at a Netflix-hosted cocktail party during the Toronto International Film Festival, both women attended what was meant to be an informal industry mixer. According to a veteran publicist who was present that night, Meghan was holding court with a group of younger actors and indie producers, discussing media narratives and how she planned to evolve beyond her role on Suits. It was there that she reportedly approached Janney, introduced herself warmly, and complimented her work, particularly her recent role in the film The Duff. Janney was gracious, as always. But something about the exchange, multiple sources claim, didn't land the way Meghan expected. One assistant overheard Janney saying afterward that Meghan was trying a little too hard to sell herself, and that she had a very curated answer for every question. It wasn't meant to be cruel. But in an industry built on whispers, that comment traveled quickly and, inevitably, back to Meghan. Some say Meghan felt dismissed. Others say she felt exposed. Whatever the emotion, it marked a subtle shift. Those close to her claim she began referring to Janney less in interviews, pivoting instead to other icons. Ava DuVernay, Viola Davis, even Angelina Jolie. It was a quiet redirection, but telling. The real fracture, however, may have occurred during an Emmy Awards press junket in 2017, the same year Meghan's relationship with Prince Harry first made international headlines. At that event, Janney was asked by a reporter which emerging actors or actresses she felt were poised for greatness. She named several: Ruth Negga, Riz Ahmed, Elizabeth Moss, but noticeably omitted Meghan, who was already a media darling due to her royal romance. According to one producer who attended the junket, Janney was later asked off-camera whether she considered Meghan Markle a serious actress. Her response, the producer claims, was carefully phrased but unmistakably cool. "She's very polished," Janney allegedly said. "But I don't think I've seen enough of her work to comment on her range." That quote never made it to publication. But once again, it reportedly found its way back to Meghan, this time via a fellow actress in their shared circle. Now, to be fair, there is no definitive proof that Janney intended any harm. She has always been known for her honesty, not malice. But in a climate where perception is everything, those few words stung. For someone like Meghan, who had already endured years of typecasting and subtle exclusion, the message felt clear, even among her fellow women in. Fast forward to 2019. Meghan was now the Duchess of Sussex. She had married into the most visible monarchy on earth, weathered a ruthless tabloid campaign, and begun carving out a new identity in the philanthropic and entertainment worlds. Her name was no longer just on entertainment sites. It was splashed across political headlines, advocacy platforms, and international debate stages. But if there was a sense of arrival, there was also a shadow, the persistent feeling that some in the industry still didn't take her seriously, still viewed her as a reality show in royal clothing, still saw her as someone who got famous for marrying into power rather than earning it on her own. And nowhere, some insiders believe, was that skepticism more palpable than in the rooms Allison Janney frequented. In 2021, when Meghan and Harry launched their production company, Archwell Productions, industry conversations flared up again. Reports circulated that Meghan was actively pursuing high-profile collaborations. A-list directors, Oscar-winning actresses. She reportedly sent out feelers to several industry veterans, among them Allison Janney. Nothing ever materialized, but rumors swirled that Janney had politely declined any involvement in Meghan's upcoming projects. Whether that was due to scheduling conflicts, brand alignment, or something more personal, no one could say for sure. But in Meghan's world, a world where timing is everything and optics mean even more, it was another door left visibly ajar, but ultimately closed. So when Meghan walked onto that red carpet at the Las Culturistas Culture Awards, it wasn't just a surprise appearance. To those who knew the backstory, it was a statement, a power play, a confrontation years in the making. Not just about one comment or one rejection, but about an entire dynamic that had played out in hushed tones and subtle exclusions for nearly a decade. Allison Janney represented a world Meghan had always wanted access to, but never quite felt welcomed by. And Meghan, to Janney, may have symbolized something equally uncomfortable. A person who once admired her, but who now carried with her a reputation of entitlement, unpredictability, and performance beyond the screen. The truth is, Hollywood is rarely about open feuds. Most rivalries are shrouded in silence, expressed through casting decisions and unreturned calls, through body language on carpets and pauses in interviews. It's a place where resentment is often repackaged as professionalism, and personal rejection is masked by schedule conflicts and vague emails. But every now and then, those unspoken tensions erupt. And when they do, they don't happen in private conference rooms or backlit corridors. They happen in public, on red carpets, in front of cameras, under lights designed to flatter, but which expose everything. Meghan Markle and Allison Janney had spent years orbiting each other, one ascending, one established. One forging a legacy through resilience, the other defending a legacy built on restraint. And in the chaotic ballet of fame, it was perhaps inevitable that their paths would not only cross, but collide. That night wasn't just about a confrontation. It was about years of silent friction finally given a voice, one that echoed far louder than either woman may have intended. No one saw her name on the guest list, not even in the whispers of last-minute arrivals or rumored VIP cameos. There were no press confirmations, no scheduled media interviews, and no insider leaks ahead of time. In fact, within the flurry of public relations chatter leading up to the Las Culturistas Culture Awards, Meghan Markle's name had been conspicuously absent. And yet, there she was, stepping out of a black SUV just minutes before the red carpet was set to close, disrupting the rhythm of the evening like an unscripted twist in a tightly choreographed play. Her arrival was not only unscheduled, it was unannounced. For an event so meticulously curated, with security protocols and red carpet time, slots plotted down to the minute, this kind of surprise appearance was almost unheard of. The press line stiffened. Production assistants checked their tablets and earpieces with visible confusion. Even the photographers, usually laser-focused on scheduled celebrities, paused as the crowd surged toward the woman now emerging under the event lights. It wasn't just that Meghan showed up uninvited. It was how she did it. She didn't come in quietly through a back entrance. She didn't blend into the crowd with subtlety or reserve. No, Meghan Markle arrived as though the moment itself owed her its full attention. There was a deliberate quality to her steps, her gaze, even the timing of her entrance, like she had waited for the perfect moment to make a point, and this was it. She wore a dramatic, architectural silver gown that caught every sliver of light and scattered it like glass. The design was avant-garde but refined, a piece that spoke not just of fashion but of identity, of statement. The slit on the right leg rose high enough to catch gasps but stopped just short of scandal. Her hair was swept back into a low, elegant bun, revealing a pair of diamond earrings that shimmered with every subtle turn of her head. Her makeup was flawless, not theatrical, but strategic. She didn't look like someone trying to belong. She looked like someone reminding the room that she never needed permission in the first place. But those who knew the mechanics of events like this recognized immediately what wasn't there, and what that said. There was no formal security escort from the venue. No press team guiding her along the media line. No designated handler to coordinate with the event producers. Meghan had brought her own people, and from the way they hovered, tense, careful, watchful, it was clear that this appearance was outside of protocol. Her assistant was visibly anxious, whispering into a Bluetooth headset and constantly scanning the surroundings. Her bodyguard, tall and tightly built, kept a two-step radius between Meghan and everyone else, even as she moved forward into the crowd. The red carpet, moments earlier a parade of color and laughter, fell into a kind of stunned silence. A hush that spread not out of awe but out of confusion, tension, and something else harder to name. Disbelief, perhaps. It wasn't that Meghan was unwelcome, per se, but in this space. This particular ceremony built around authenticity and artistic voice. Her presence felt like a sharp interruption, not a natural extension. Observers began exchanging glances. Whispers grew louder. Was she invited? Did they know she was coming? What is she doing here? Within seconds, phones were out. Streams were live. Tweets were firing off across the digital universe. And all the while, Meghan walked. She didn't smile for the cameras. She didn't stop for any of the reporters calling her name. She barely acknowledged the faces staring at her with a mixture of fascination and skepticism. She was looking past them, not at the photographers, not at the fans, not even at the celebrities clustered in the center of the carpet. She was walking toward one person, Allison Janney. That realization didn't strike immediately. It wasn't until Meghan adjusted her path to align directly with Janney's position, who had been mid-interview with a red carpet correspondent, that the dots began to connect. It was too precise to be coincidence. Too targeted. Janney's assistant, standing just off camera, noticed it first. Her posture changed. She moved slightly closer, her hand tightening around a tablet as she observed Meghan's trajectory. And then Allison turned. Not by accident, by instinct. She felt it. The presence. The change in atmosphere. She looked over her shoulder and saw Meghan approaching. No hesitation. No smile. Just silent, steady momentum. The interview stopped abruptly. The correspondent, sensing something unusual, turned away from the camera and lowered her mic. One of the photographers shouted Meghan's name, then another. A few flashbulbs went off. The crowd shifted like a wave crashing into itself. Still, Meghan said nothing. She walked straight up to Janney, stopping within a foot of her, close enough that only a slight lean forward would breach personal space. Her expression was unreadable, a strange mix of calm and intensity. Janney stood her ground, arms at her sides, her face neutral but alert. She didn't flinch. She didn't smile. She didn't move to greet. What happened next was barely audible to anyone beyond a few feet, but it was unmistakably tense. According to one sound engineer nearby, Meghan's voice was low but pointed. Words like disrespect and you know what you did floated to the edges of the circle. There were no greetings, no pretense of politeness, just directness, accusation, emotion. Janney responded with restraint. Her voice, always measured, remained so now. One witness claimed she said something like, "This isn't the place." Another heard her say, "I'm not going to engage." Regardless of the phrasing, the tone was unmistakable, firm, not hostile, but non-negotiable. And then came the shift. Meghan's expression flickered, a tightness around the eyes, a flick of the jaw. Her assistant moved a step forward, perhaps sensing escalation. Janney's manager, now fully engaged, glanced toward a nearby security officer. A subtle nod, a whispered command. Within seconds, two security personnel emerged from the sidelines and began approaching. Not running, not rushing, but with clear intent. Meghan stepped back slightly, realizing the optics had turned against her. Janney, for her part, didn't raise her voice, didn't react. She merely gave a small signal to her team, turned slowly, and walked away. It was a devastatingly powerful exit, the kind of silence that speaks louder than confrontation. And Meghan stood there, momentarily alone, surrounded by silence and cameras and a crowd that didn't know how to react. Had she come to challenge? To demand an apology? To assert herself in a space where she felt erased? No one could say for sure. But the message had been sent, and it was being interpreted in real time across every media outlet in the country. What followed were rapid, chaotic developments. Meghan was quietly escorted from the red carpet area. Staff at the Culture Awards scrambled to get ahead of the narrative. Journalists were already writing their headlines. Meghan's camp went into damage control. Janney's team held their silence. And those who had witnessed it all firsthand were left with the same burning question. Why? Why choose that moment? That venue? That person? Why insert herself into an evening celebrating artistic voices with such a confrontational move? Why risk everything? Reputation, credibility, public goodwill, for a confrontation that seemed so premeditated? Some would later speculate that Meghan had grown tired of the whispered critiques, the subtle slights, the backhanded dismissals from her peers in Hollywood. That this night, this moment, had been chosen to reclaim something, her agency, her dignity, her voice. Others insisted it was a miscalculation, a moment driven by emotion, not strategy, that Meghan had arrived expecting to be heard, not realizing that her mere presence would trigger a tidal wave of scrutiny and speculation. But whatever her motivation, the impact was undeniable. Meghan Markle, the Duchess who had once stepped away from the royal family in pursuit of independence, had stepped into another war, one not of bloodlines and crowns, but of image and perception. And in this battle, the rules were just as brutal, the stakes just as high. Her unexpected appearance had upended the entire evening, derailed the narrative, and catapulted a private feud into the harshest possible spotlight. And for Allison Janney, a woman known for diplomacy and poise, it forced a decision she never expected to make, one that would change the conversation forever. Allison Janney had long been known as a woman who could command attention without ever raising her voice. There was something in the way she carried herself, a mixture of grace, confidence, and unspoken strength, that made people listen when she spoke and respect her when she chose not to. In an industry addicted to drama, where feuds often played out on Twitter threads and awards speeches turned into passive-aggressive volleys, Janney had always been the exception. She wasn't flashy. She didn't crave headlines. She didn't need to manufacture relevance. She let the work speak for itself. And when the work was done, she retreated, not out of arrogance, but out of respect for herself and the craft she had mastered. So when the images of the red carpet incident with Meghan Markle exploded across the internet, people didn't rush to conclusions about Janney. They paused. They watched. They waited. Because if she had called security, if she had made that decision in such a visible and permanent way, there had to be more to the story. In the hours that followed the confrontation, the reaction from Janney's camp was one of silence. Not the kind of panicked silence that screams guilt, but the kind of thoughtful, measured quiet that suggests maturity. Her publicist declined comment. Her manager issued a single line to a trade publication. Allison has no statement at this time. That restraint only fueled curiosity. Everyone wanted to know what had really happened in those tense minutes on the carpet. But Janney, as always, refused to be rushed by public demand. Those close to her described the hours after the incident as surreal. She was shaken, but not rattled. Concerned, but not overwhelmed. She kept saying, "This wasn't about me," said a close friend who spoke under condition of anonymity. She didn't want the story to be about conflict. She wanted to walk away, but it reached a point where she couldn't ignore it. It wasn't the first time Janney had found herself in the uncomfortable spotlight of celebrity politics. Throughout her career, she had worked alongside giants and navigated more than her share of egos, power plays, and behind-the-scenes chaos. But she had always done so with a kind of unshakable centeredness. A moral compass that kept her from engaging in the toxicity that seemed to consume so many around her. Part of that came from how she entered the business. Allison Janney wasn't an overnight star. Her rise was long, deliberate, and forged through decades of hard work. She studied drama at Kenyon College before attending the neighborhood Playhouse School of the Theater in New York. She paid her dues in off-Broadway plays, bit roles in TV shows, and small supporting parts that barely paid the rent. But she never took shortcuts. She built her reputation the slow way, through performance, through discipline, through undeniable talent. When she finally broke through with her Emmy-winning role as C.J. Craig on The West Wing, it wasn't because she was trendy. It was because she was excellent. The character was brilliant, vulnerable, sharp, and commanding, a mirror of Janney herself. That performance not only made her a household name, it established her as one of the most respected actresses in the industry. Offers poured in, not because she courted them, but because people wanted to work with someone who elevated everything around her. She transitioned seamlessly between drama and comedy, winning awards for roles in everything from Tanya to Mom. She was never typecast, never boxed in. She refused to chase celebrity, choosing instead to build a body of work that was rich, nuanced, and deeply human. And along the way, she earned something far more valuable than fame. She earned trust. So when she was seen gesturing to security on that red carpet, most in the industry didn't assume drama. They assumed there was a reason. A good one. Those who had worked with Janney over the years were quick to speak up, not with tabloid-friendly quotes, but with quiet affirmations of her character. "Allison doesn't lose her temper," said one former director. If she took that step, it's because a boundary was crossed. And for Janney, boundaries matter. In interviews over the years, she has spoken about the importance of professionalism, of knowing when to speak and when to walk away. She has described herself as someone who values personal space, who believes in the power of listening, and who tries never to let ego dictate her decisions. That ethos had guided her through some of the most intense sets in Hollywood, through moments of conflict and tension that would have crushed lesser actors. It's what kept her grounded. The red carpet confrontation challenged that grounding in a way few things had. According to witnesses, Janney tried several times to de-escalate. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't insult. She didn't retaliate. She simply stood her ground. But when it became clear that Meghan was not going to step away, when the confrontation began drawing the attention of dozens of reporters and cameras, Janney was faced with a choice. Stay and allow the situation to spiral further, or act. She acted. Not impulsively. Not theatrically. Deliberately. And then she walked away. That image, Janney turning her back on the confrontation and retreating with quiet dignity, struck a chord with people. It wasn't just an exit. It was a statement. A refusal to let chaos dictate the moment. A decision to prioritize peace over spectacle. And it stood in stark contrast to the media frenzy that erupted in its wake. While Meghan's team scrambled to explain her presence at the event and tried to frame the confrontation as a misunderstanding, Janney's silence spoke louder than any spin. For days, she said nothing. She didn't go on talk shows. She didn't release a reactive statement. She let the dust settle. And in doing so, gave the public a chance to reflect, not just react. When she did finally speak, it wasn't through a flashy press release or viral video. It was through a short, heartfelt message posted on her social media accounts. The statement was just a few paragraphs long, but its tone was unmistakable. Last night's events were unfortunate. I value privacy, respect, and professionalism, always. Boundaries are not just about space. They are about emotional safety. Everyone deserves to feel safe in the environments they work in, attend, or share with others. I will not speak further on the matter, but I will say this. We must normalize walking away from confrontation, especially when it serves no purpose but to create spectacle. There was no name mentioned, no direct accusation, no bitterness, just clarity and quiet strength. The reaction to that statement was swift and deeply supportive. Fellow actors and directors reposted it. Commentators praised it. Fans thanked her for modeling restraint in a world that rewards outrage. In an environment where everyone seemed to be shouting, Janney had whispered, and her whisper echoed louder than anyone else's scream. But not everyone took her silence as surrender. Some in the media began to ask hard questions about why Meghan had felt so provoked, about whether Janney's past statements or silence contributed to the tensions. It was an attempt to inject controversy into a moment that was, in truth, painfully human. Two women, both powerful in different ways, both wounded by an industry that rarely offers safe spaces for anyone to be vulnerable. Janney didn't engage with the second wave of speculation. She returned to work, attended rehearsals, focused on her projects. When asked about the incident in later interviews, she deflected. In doing so, she reminded everyone why she remains such a powerful presence in Hollywood. Not because she dominates the room, but because she never tries to. Not because she wins every battle, but because she refuses to be dragged into fights that don't serve her values. She is, in the end, what she has always been, a woman who knows who she is, and who refuses to let anyone take that away. Her quiet dignity didn't just defuse a potentially explosive moment, it reframed it. It reminded the world that power doesn't always look like aggression. Sometimes, it looks like restraint. Sometimes, the most courageous thing you can do is walk away. In the endless stream of red carpet appearances, few moments are remembered beyond the 24-hour news cycle. A glittering gown, a meme-worthy pose, a charming soundbite. These are the ordinary markers of celebrity evenings. But what happened between Meghan Markle and Allison Janney on that electric night wasn't just remembered. It was seared into public consciousness, not because it was dramatic, but because it wasn't supposed to happen at all. In a space built on pretense and politeness, a real confrontation unfolded. And the moment Meghan stepped into Allison's space, all the unwritten rules of red carpet civility collapsed. The footage that circulated online after the incident, blurry, cut into fragments, replayed with slow-motion captions, captured only pieces of what was, in truth, a complex and emotional exchange. But from those fragments, combined with eyewitness accounts and leaked audio from press mics nearby, a clearer picture began to emerge. This was not a casual greeting gone wrong. This was a deliberate confrontation, the kind that doesn't begin on red carpets, but ends there after years of history. It started with eye contact. Meghan, walking toward Janney with that steady, unwavering stride, was not wandering. She wasn't drifting through interviews or mingling with fellow attendees. Her path was straight. Her target was clear. And from the moment she broke away from her assistant and stepped toward Janney, who was just finishing a soundbite about women's roles in television, the energy shifted. Janney noticed her approach. She turned fully, her expression neutral but attentive. Meghan, now just a few feet away, didn't extend her hand. She didn't smile. She didn't ask if it was a good time to speak. She simply began talking. Witnesses close enough to hear reported that Meghan's voice was calm at first, but intensely focused, like someone who had rehearsed her words, who knew what she wanted to say and how she wanted to say it. According to one entertainment correspondent station nearby, her opening words were something along the lines of, "You know what you did." Janney, taken aback but maintaining composure, reportedly replied, "Meghan, this isn't the place for this." But Meghan wasn't interested in walking away. Observers say she leaned slightly closer, lowering her voice enough to keep the conversation from becoming an outright spectacle, but not so much that it went unnoticed. Her tone was clipped, assertive. She accused Janney, without naming specific instances, of dismissing her publicly, of contributing to a narrative that painted her as performative rather than purposeful. She referenced past comments, likely the ones unearthed after the Toronto Film Festival and the Emmy junket, and suggested that Janney had, intentionally or not, fueled the kind of skepticism that had long plagued Meghan's reputation in Hollywood. Janney listened. She didn't interrupt. She didn't roll her eyes or scoff. But her body language told its own story. Arms at her sides, one foot slightly shifted as though preparing to pivot. Her expression was unreadable, but her breathing slowed, the telltale sign of someone trying to stay calm, trying not to match the intensity rising in front of them. Then came the turning point. Meghan reportedly said something that pierced the air with such precision, even those standing several feet away stopped what they were doing. According to a makeup artist nearby, Meghan said, "You smiled in my face, and you mocked me behind my back. You didn't just ignore me. You belittled me. You helped others dismiss me. And you did it while pretending to be above it all." It was a direct accusation, a challenge not just to Janney's professionalism, but to her character. The implication was clear. Meghan wasn't confronting a peer. She was confronting someone she believed had undermined her behind closed doors while maintaining a veneer of grace in public. Janney's response, while not fully audible in most recordings, was later pieced together through overlapping sources. She reportedly said, "I've never spoken about you with anything less than professionalism. If you have a problem, we can talk, not here." But that offer of private dialogue didn't seem to satisfy Meghan. She took another step forward, still within boundaries, but close enough that Janney's assistant shifted uncomfortably. The photographers began to sense the tension and started snapping rapid-fire images. The background hum of the red carpet was thinning. People were turning. Cameras, once fixated on gowns and glam, were now zeroed in on this rare spectacle. Two powerful women, face to face, in conflict. That's when Janney made her decision. She turned slightly to her assistant and made a subtle motion, a tilt of the head, a tiny movement of her fingers. It was imperceptible to most, but not to the trained eye of red carpet coordinators. Within moments, a staff member whispered into a walkie-talkie. Another moved toward security. Janney turned back to Meghan and said, with a voice now slightly firmer, according to several sources, "I'm not going to do this. Not like this. Not here." Meghan, now visibly tense, took a step back. Her assistant reached out to lightly touch her arm. But before anything else could be said, two security personnel arrived, not with aggression but with unmistakable presence. They positioned themselves close enough to signal that the situation was being observed and, if necessary, managed. The next few seconds were chaotic, even in their silence. Meghan looked from Janney to the security officers. She didn't scream. She didn't protest. But her expression said everything. Shock, betrayal, a flicker of disbelief, as though she hadn't expected Janney, the unshakable, ever-diplomatic Janney, to take such a definitive action. For someone who had lived years under public scrutiny, Meghan seemed suddenly caught in the reality that this moment couldn't be spun. It was happening, and the whole world was watching. Janney didn't speak again. She didn't gloat or smirk. She simply turned and walked away. Not in anger, but with the unmistakable composure of someone who had reached her threshold and had made peace with her choice. Security didn't lay a hand on Meghan. They didn't usher her off like a disruptive guest, but their presence was enough. Meghan's assistant whispered something into her ear. Meghan gave a small nod, turned without a word, and began walking back toward the perimeter of the carpet. For a full minute after they left, the carpet remained oddly quiet. The noise didn't resume right away. People were processing what they had just witnessed. Not a meltdown, not a screaming match, but something far more unnerving. A quiet, surgical confrontation between two people whose histories had finally collided under lights too bright to conceal anything. In the hours that followed, every media outlet rushed to get the scoop. Quotes were pulled. Eyewitnesses were tracked down. The blurred audio recordings were enhanced and analyzed like pieces of evidence in a courtroom drama. The world wanted to know, what had Meghan said? What had Janney done? Who was in the right? But beneath the headlines, something deeper was stirring. This wasn't just about celebrity conflict. It was about dignity, about reputation, about the emotional cost of being silenced, and the quiet fury of being mischaracterized. For Meghan, the confrontation was an attempt to reclaim narrative control. For Janney, it was about upholding a personal boundary, one that she rarely had to enforce in public. And for those watching, it was a reminder that even the most poised personas, the ones we place on pedestals, are human, capable of frustration, capable of confrontation, capable of breaking their silence when pushed beyond reason. That brief exchange, though fleeting in real time, would become the foundation for a cultural reckoning. It challenged the idea that women in power should always be smiling, always be tolerant, always be silent in the face of criticism. It raised uncomfortable questions about image, about respect, and about what happens when the desire to be heard meets the right to be left alone. In the days to come, statements would be released. Sides would be taken. The media would spin their narratives. But this moment, this quiet clash of wills, would linger far longer than any of the headlines. Because in that flash of tension, something cracked open. And what spilled out wasn't just celebrity drama. It was truth. Every story has a moment that changes everything. A beat where things can no longer go back to how they were. It's not always loud. It doesn't always come with shouting or tears. Sometimes it's quiet. Simple. A single decision. A glance. A gesture. But from that moment forward, everything shifts. That was what happened when Allison Janney turned her head slightly, locked eyes with her assistant, and gave the briefest nod toward the far side of the carpet. It was the signal that would turn an awkward encounter into a full-blown incident, the one that ultimately summoned security to intervene and left Meghan Markle visibly stunned. In the seconds before the nod, the red carpet had reached a tipping point. Meghan had said her piece. Her words, though muffled by the crowd and music, carried a sharpness that only years of suppressed resentment could sharpen. She stood, chin lifted, lips pressed tightly together, waiting. Waiting for Janney to either acknowledge the truth she had presented or to fight back. But Janney didn't either. She didn't offer contrition. She didn't argue. She didn't flinch. Instead, she chose to disengage. That nod wasn't dramatic. It wasn't theatrical. But it was decisive. And in a space as hyper-controlled as an awards night carpet, where every move is choreographed, that single unscripted motion triggered a series of quiet, behind-the-scenes reactions. First, Janney's assistant, already on edge, stepped back and whispered into her earpiece. The staffer on the other end, stationed near the carpet entrance, responded without hesitation. Seconds later, two members of the venue's private security detail began moving, slowly, carefully, threading their way through the crowd like chess pieces. They weren't running. They weren't even walking fast. But their direction was unmistakable. Meghan didn't see them at first. Her focus was still on Janney, who had just turned her body away in what felt less like retreat and more like refusal. Meghan's assistant, however, noticed immediately. Her expression flickered, tension creeping across her face as she took a half-step toward her client. Her hand hovered near Meghan's elbow, but didn't touch. It was a subtle signal. Something's happening. We need to pivot. The photographers picked up on the shift as well. What began as a curiosity, an awkward, if somewhat spicy, moment between two celebrities was now becoming something else. Eyes darted toward the approaching guards. Microphones were lowered. Conversations quieted. The air changed. Security reached the perimeter of the interaction and paused. One guard made a slight motion with his hand, not a command, but an offer, a chance for Meghan to de-escalate on her own terms. It was an opportunity for her to walk away with control. But that moment of choice passed quickly. Meghan turned, finally noticing the presence of the guards. Her brows furrowed. She glanced toward her assistant, then back at Janney, whose back was now turned, engaged in conversation with a staffer near the Step and Repeat banner. And in that brief second, you could see it. The realization. The unraveling of whatever internal narrative Meghan had carried into that night. The sense that maybe, just maybe, this confrontation would be cathartic or victorious, or at least redemptive. Instead, she was now the focal point of a security intervention. The optics were undeniable. To her credit, Meghan didn't lash out. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't accuse or cry or make a scene. But her body language told the story. Shoulders tight, posture rigid, eyes scanning, not for help, but for stability. Her assistant leaned in and said something too soft to be recorded. Meghan nodded once, turned, and began walking. But the damage had been done. Not in a legal sense, not in a physical one, but reputationally, culturally. This was a moment that would follow her. Because in Hollywood, perception is everything. And whether or not she intended to confront Janney, whether or not she felt justified, the story had already written itself. Meghan Markle, uninvited guest, confronts respected actress and is quietly removed from red carpet. The backlash began before she even exited the venue. Reporters, feverishly texting their editors, sent through the first drafts of what would soon become national headlines. Social media erupted with second-hand accounts and video clips posted out of sequence, out of context, but not out of impact. A Twitter user posted, "I was 5 feet away when Meghan walked up to Allison Janney like a storm. Never seen tension that thick before security even stepped in." Another wrote, "This wasn't just awkward. It was intentional. Meghan had an agenda." Within 30 minutes, the story was trending. Yet what most people didn't see, what the headlines couldn't fully capture, was the human moment just before Meghan disappeared into the wings. As she passed a mirrored column near the carpet exit, she paused. Briefly, just enough to glance at her reflection. It wasn't vanity. It was disbelief. She stared at herself, not to admire, but to assess. Her expression was not one of anger. It was devastation, quiet and private. A look of someone who had rehearsed this moment countless times in her head and was now standing in the aftermath of its failure. She didn't look like a villain. She looked like someone who had lost a battle she never truly understood she was fighting. Meanwhile, Janney continued with the evening as though nothing had happened. She posed for photographers. She gave interviews. But those close to her could see the toll. Her smile, always genuine, was now slightly tighter. Her answers a little more rehearsed. The emotional residue of confrontation lingered, even if she refused to show it. In private, she reportedly asked to shorten her time on the carpet. Not out of fear, but out of fatigue. She was drained, not by Meghan's presence, but by the energy it took to maintain composure under fire. Inside the event, word of the incident spread like wildfire. Celebrities checked their phones mid-dinner. Publicists whispered into ears. The incident was already reshaping the narrative of the evening. The award show's hosts made a subtle joke about spontaneous drama on the carpet during their opening monologue, drawing scattered, nervous laughter. But everyone knew. Everyone was watching. And in that instant, a cultural line had been crossed. Not because Meghan had confronted someone. Celebrities clash all the time. Not because Allison had called security. Boundaries are necessary. But because the entire exchange took place on a platform built on image, control, and illusion. And that illusion had been shattered. The red carpet, once a space of curated perfection, had revealed itself as something else, a battlefield. Not for violence, but for reputation. For identity. For who gets to speak and who gets to be heard. For who draws the line and who crosses it. And in that theater of unspoken rules, Meghan had broken protocol. Janney had enforced it. And the result was a fracture that could not be undone. Later that night, as the event concluded and the guests filtered out into black cars and swirling paparazzi, two very different departures occurred. Janney left quietly, without comment, waving to a few fans and sliding into a town car with her assistant. She would not speak publicly for days, but her silence was intentional, powerful. Meghan left under heavier scrutiny. Paparazzi followed her vehicle. Speculative headlines were already live. A short statement from her publicist arrived within hours. The Duchess of Sussex attended the event in good faith. Any suggestion of conflict is inaccurate, but the statement lacked force. It felt perfunctory. It didn't address the real question. Why was she there in the first place? Because that was the question hanging in the air. Not what happened, but why. Why Meghan had come, knowing her presence would be disruptive. Why she had approached Janney, knowing their history. Why she had allowed that confrontation to play out in full view of the cameras and the critics. Was it strategy? A miscalculation? A moment of emotional vulnerability pushed too far? Or was it something else entirely? A final attempt to reclaim dignity in an industry that had, time and again, refused to fully embrace her? Whatever the answer, the turning point had arrived. And from that night on, the narrative would no longer be about what could have been. It would be about what was. As soon as Meghan Markle disappeared from view behind the velvet drapery at the perimeter of the Las Culturistas Culture Awards red carpet, the rumors began. Whispers turned to shouts, texts became tweets, and in less than 10 minutes, the internet was ablaze with speculation. Had she been arrested? Was she detained by the police? Did she voluntarily leave, or was she escorted out by force? Was this an overreaction, or was something more serious lurking beneath the surface? These questions exploded online and off, fueled by conflicting eyewitness accounts and blurry, rapid-fire video clips. The truth, as it often is in celebrity spectacles, was more complicated and far less theatrical than the digital frenzy would have people believe. Yet, in this age of virality, perception often outruns reality. And in Meghan's case, perception was about to become its own beast. The earliest reports were chaotic. One entertainment journalist tweeted from the venue. Confirmed, Meghan Markle escorted out of Culture Awards after altercation with A-lister. Situation escalating. Within minutes, tabloids across the globe lifted the line and added their own spin. Duchess detained in red carpet ruckus. Meghan Markle involved in near arrest at Hollywood Awards and royally removed. Meghan faces security clash. The headlines were sensational. The truth, not quite as black and white. Security at events like the Culture Awards is run like a covert military operation. Every staffer is trained to handle disturbances with calm professionalism, not chaos. The guards who approached Meghan during the incident were not police officers. They were private security employees trained specifically to de-escalate situations without public fallout. Their appearance on the scene wasn't an indication of criminal activity. It was a procedural response to a confrontation that had drawn public attention and threatened to disrupt the flow of the red carpet. According to internal reports leaked later by a junior staffer, S.